obviously tonight we're going to be talking about camping and some gear essential things that you guys might need. We're going to answer some of your questions. So why don't we just do a real quick introduction, what you do at the Federation, and then also maybe a real quick intro to your kind of camping experience and things like that.
Great. Well, I'm Kate Hill. I am the multimedia manager here at the Federation. I take care of our website and all of our graphic design work and emails that go out. So all that fun stuff. I have been camping pretty avidly since probably about college. And I really enjoyed backpacking. And really, I just love being outside in general. So camping takes care of that.
And I'm Megan Hall. I'm the development manager at the Federation. So I run all of our fundraising campaigns. When you guys are on our mailing list and get those emails, those are my campaigns. We appreciate your support if you are donating. And I got into camping, I'd say maybe, around 2012 or so. I'm from Tennessee and moved away for a while. And when I came back, I just wanted to get out into nature more. So started camping then, and have just done more and more of it since then.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you guys on here. It's fun to have other staff members join and participate. Chris, do you want to do just a real quick introduction of yourself, and then maybe cover again how folks can answer or ask questions tonight, and then how we can interact with them going forward in tonight's class?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm the West Tennessee field rep for the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, kind of Jeff's counterpart on this side of the state. And I'll just be running background tonight. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So what are we going to talk about tonight specifically? If you looked at the title of the class, you probably know we're going to be talking about some camping gear, but also we want to talk about why we like to camp and where we like to camp. We're lucky here in Tennessee. We've got a ton of different places that you can go out and experience camping and nature. And Kate and Megan are going to be sharing a lot of this info with you. I'm not going to talk the whole time. They're going to share a lot of their experience with you as well. I hope you guys ask questions. If at any point you do have questions, feel free to throw those in the question and answer function, and we'll answer those live, or Chris can type out an answer for you as well. So that's going to be the three big things that we talk about tonight. So let's just jump right into the first one. Why do we like to camp? And Kate, Megan, feel free at any point just to kind of jump in and share anything that you feel like I might have left out. But one of the things that we were talking about, why we like camping and why I like camping, and so other many people like it, is that it can be paired with so many other outdoor activities, whether you're hunting, fishing, hiking, or canoeing. You can factor all of these other outdoor activities in with hunting or with camping, excuse me. So like I said, with the Hunting and Fishing Academy, we have a lot of different camping experiences that we do. A lot of people just like to go hike and experience nature in that way, and camping can be paired with that as well. And just like we said earlier, you can kayak, you can canoe, boating. It can all be paired with camping. So it doesn't have to be this one standalone thing. A lot of times it is, but it doesn't have to be. And you can really take full advantage of the outdoors, full advantage of that resource, and utilize it in a lot of different ways. It also just helps us connect with nature. It serves as a good time for us to slow down, step away from busy schedules, enjoy the peacefulness of the outdoors. That's what I really like about it. As I get older, I realize schedules are always busy. There's always things to do, but when you find time to go out and enjoy nature, it always serves as a good recharge. And then it also just creates a good, strong sense of community. And that's something that we really push with the Hunting and Fishing Academy at our in-person events, is we always like to get folks around the campfire, get them talking. A lot of times people are sometimes hesitant about having to sleep on the ground or in a tent for a few days. But by the end of it, when you ask them, what did you most enjoy about this experience? And it's the community aspect of it, meeting new people, just sharing a meal around a campfire. There's like this nostalgia around it that people just really seem to enjoy. And even those who are kind of hesitant at first, they always enjoy that aspect of camping as well. It brings families together, it brings friends together. And again, we always try to put a major emphasis on that community aspect in our program. So I'm going to tell you guys a real quick story on why I like camping, and I'm going to be quiet for a minute. And Megan and Kate, I'm going to let you guys talk before we move into anything gear specific. But one of the biggest reasons that I like camping is because of this little cabin right here. It might not look like much, but if you guys have ever seen the movie Jeremiah Johnson, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about here. And if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's got Robert Redford in it. It's from the 70s. It's great. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And in it, he leads his city life. He wants to go be a mountain man. He goes up in the mountains to hunt and trap, and he goes and builds his own cabin. And as a kid, I watched that movie almost every single night with my dad. And one of the coolest things when I was little was that we had this little piece of family property in Cheatham County, Ashland City, just right outside of Nashville. It's where we hunted. It's where we just went to go play in the woods. And one day Dad was like, we need to build a cabin down here. And this was way back when I was little. And I still remember it very well. I remember watching Dad, cut the trees, strip the branches, prepare the site. And little by little, we built this little cabin right here. And I think we finished it way back in 2001. And that cabin was where our family gathered. We had family reunions down there. We went deer hunting. That was our campsite. I mean, that's where I grew up right there. Sadly, that piece of property is not in our family anymore. And I wonder if our little cabin's still standing down there a lot of times. But the reason I love camping, and still to this day, is because of the memories that I made at that cabin down there in those woods in Ashland City. And I eagerly hope that one day my family can get back to a place and have something similar to that. But you don't need a cabin to go out and enjoy camping. That was just a fun thing that we always had a wood stove and got to do all that kind of stuff. But that's one of the big reasons why I love it. I'm going to be quiet here for a few seconds. Kate, Megan, why don't you guys just walk us through one, why do you like to camp? What got you started in it? And, what is it that kind of keeps you going back? Just, quick little thing on what do you like about it? What do you most enjoy about being out there?
Well, I'd say for me, I did not grow up camping at all. I don't think I went camping for the first time, maybe, I don't know, I made it in my late 20s or so when I went camping. But I initially had gotten into just hiking because I was really interested in plant identification. And so I would go on these long hikes just looking for plants with a guidebook, looking to identify things. And the more that I got outside and the more comfortable I became, the more I sort of got comfortable with the idea of going camping and sleeping outside. And I think the first camping trip I went on was a backpacking trip. Just sort of skipped the car camping part, went back to car camping after I tried backpacking first. But I think it's just that piece of, one, it was learning about nature, identifying the plants that I was learning about, sort of medicinal plants, how people have used them in the past, and then being able to find those plants actually out, in our parks was really fascinating. But that reconnection and that sort of the solitude was really what sort of hooked me on it in the first place. Over time, I think it just became more of a sort of meeting a challenge, seeing what longer hikes I could take, or sort of new, how could I climb this higher peak, or could I go a farther distance? But at first, it really was just plants and that connection with nature that got me there.
Awesome. What about you, Kate?
I didn't grow up camping either, but I grew up playing outside, playing in the woods. So I think when I got to college, that was just kind of the next step, was sleeping outside. I didn't start backpacking until a little bit after college, did some car camping in college, but prefer backpacking now. But I really enjoy hiking, and I have found that an overlook after a 5-mile hike with a huge pack on your back is a lot different experience than just driving to it in your car. So, and like Megan, I like the challenge of, how far can I go today? How far can I go tomorrow? I hammock camp, so I love waking up and the first thing that I see are tree limbs. That gets me every time. I don't know. It's just an interesting experience. And yeah, any chance I get to be outside, I want to be outside.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to kind of getting some tips and tricks from you guys on some of the gear stuff y'all use, because I know we were joking about it a lot of times with some of the hunting and fishing academy events. It seems like we pack really, really heavy. So there's a certain way that I'm just accustomed to doing things. So I'll be interested to hear how you guys like to do it. So that kind of just leads us right into the next part. We talked a little bit about why we like to camp, and obviously you guys are somewhat interested, or else you wouldn't be here participating in the class tonight. So one of the big things that we always hear when helping families prepare for our in-person events with Hunting and Fishing Academy is, well, what do I need? Do I need, a tent? Do I need this? Do I need that? And so we thought it would be a good idea to just break down some of the essential gear that you'll need. And that's important to remember that word essential. There's going to be a lot of things that you could get as you kind of start to accumulate knowledge and you accumulate experience. You might think, well, hey, it would be nice to have this. It would make this easier. But there's a few things that you just really got to have if you're going to go out and go camping. And everybody does it different. So don't feel like the way that we say the things that you need tonight, don't feel like that's, the end all be all. That's the truth. I mean, there's going to be a lot of different places for wiggle room where you might, do things your own way. Just because we say it one way doesn't mean you have to replicate it that way. So keep that in mind as we talk about some of this gear stuff. If you have specific questions, throw them at us. We'd be happy to hear them. But before we talk anything about gear specific, we want to talk about this concept of leave no trace, kind of what that means. What does it look like? Why is it important? And then also, how does that influence our planning? So briefly, just to kind of explain what leave no trace means is, and you'll see a lot of this kind of throughout the themes of tonight, is that we want to limit the impact that we have as humans on the resource. So if we're going into an area, say we're going to the Smoky Mountains or we're going to Fall Creek Falls and we're going to go camping, we want to limit the impact that we have on those spaces while we're there. It would be great if, somebody that came in a week after us or even a day after us had no clue that we were there right before them. We want to leave as little impact as on the land and on the wildlife as we can. And if you go to Leave No Trace's website, and we'll be sharing that with you guys as well tomorrow in our resource email. But if you go to their website, there's 7 principles that they list out that just help you kind of get a better understanding of what Leave No Trace is and how you can put it into practice. And the first one is just prepare and plan ahead. If nothing else, that just ensures safety, whether you're going by yourself or you're going with a group. Being prepared and being ready for your camping experience is going to help you stay safe, but it's also going to help you put into practice some of these other principles that we're going to talk about in a minute. And it's going to help you be able to think through things ahead of time so that you can minimize the resource damage and the impacts you have while you're out there. The second one being travel and camp on durable surfaces. That's going to help limit soil erosion, vegetation damage. I know a lot of times if you're like me, you don't think about where you're putting your feet, but where we're, frequenting and traveling while we're in these areas that aren't developed, it really has more impact than you realize. If we're constantly going in and out of the same places or we're going off the paths and things like that, it could lead to a lot of other issues later on in the future that you might not think about. The third one is going to be dispose of waste properly. And that goes beyond just plastic and trash and things that you pack in with you. Check out the Leave No Trace website for some helpful tips on like hygiene things and human waste in camping. So that's not something that you might think about as far as, planning for your trip, but they have a lot of cool resources on there that show you, how to think through some of those things and getting ready to go out on a camping trip. The fourth being leave what you find. Leave things the way they were whenever you found them. If you go camping enough, you'll see a lot of those signs at state parks, national parks that say something like, take only memories, leave only footprints, things like that. We don't want to be taking out a lot of things that we find in the woods, however cool it might be, just because it might disturb the habitat, it might disturb the wildlife and things like that that are utilizing that resource. Fifth one being minimize your campfire impacts. Avoid cutting wood from standing trees, keep your fires small, and always, extinguish those using water instead of just trying to let it burn out or something like that. That just limits the risk of starting a wildfire, things like that, but you're also just being mindful of other people while you're out there as well. Sixth one being respect wildlife, observe from a distance. I know we all see the stories in the news of bears in Gatlinburg, and then if you're out west in Yellowstone with the buffalo and things like that. So just being mindful that when you're going out to these places, the wildlife that's there, you're going into their home, you're going into their habitat, and you need to respect that. Be aware that they don't operate on your schedule, they don't operate on your planning and things like that. So being aware of that going in, and practicing respectful behavior towards wildlife is always going to be very important. And the last one, just be considerate of others. Public lands are there for the benefit of all of us, but that doesn't mean there's not any rules. Your use of the resource shouldn't inhibit somebody else's use of the resource. So always make sure that you know regulations before you go planning your next trip. A lot of different places have different rules, so just being sure that you do your homework ahead of time goes a long way in terms of leave no trace. Kate, Megan, do you guys have anything that you'd like to add to that before we move on and talk about some gear specific things?
Yeah, one thing that was brought to my attention a few years ago, which I thought at that point I was a great leave no tracer. So that can tell you that you always have something to learn in this aspect. But if you think about things like banana peels and orange peels, I used to just throw those in the woods because they are compostable, but they still take a long time to compost. So even things like that, you need to pack it out. Pretty much the only thing that you don't need to pack out is toilet paper, but you'll need to dig a hole for that and bury that so animals don't get into it.
And on a sort of similar note of a sort of leave no tracer impact, I've noticed as more and more people are getting to the outdoors, sometimes you'll be way back in the backcountry, you've hiked 14 miles in somewhere, and then you can hear a Bluetooth speaker playing music. And, just in the spirit of being considerate of others, some people are out, just trying to hear those nature sounds. And, if you want to bring music on your camping trip, headphones might be good for that. So just always being aware of those kinds of things too.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I was actually listening to a podcast today that was talking about some of these similar concepts. And one of the things they said was that nobody goes into an area and leaves absolutely zero impact. So you have to realize that just your presence being there, you're going to leave an impact, but we want to make sure that we're minimizing that and we're limiting that so that it's basically the same it was before you got there. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, nobody's going to be perfect in that, but we just want to make sure that you guys have at least a basic understanding of some of those things. That way we can all kind of start to practice those as we go forward in our camping adventures. So let's talk about some specific gear that you guys might need. Like I said earlier, the title of this class was Camping Essentials. So there's going to be a lot of things that we probably don't cover in terms of the gear that you could take. We're just going to list out some of the things that you probably are going to want to take with you just to make your experience more enjoyable. So on that same note, when thinking about what gear you might need to take with you on your next camping trip, there's going to be some considerations, things that you need to be thinking about. Obviously, the leave no trace principles that we just talked about a second ago, that's going to be a big one. thinking about what gear can I take in that's going to help me limit my impact on the land and on the resource that I'm about to go utilize. The second one being length of stay. Sometimes people like to just do little 1 or 2 night stays. A lot of times, some other people like to do week-long stays or something like that, if that's an option to you. And usually, the longer that you plan on staying, odds are the more gear that you might want to take in with you, just so you have it available once you get there. Also, consider the type of camping that you're going to be doing. Are you going to be sleeping in a tent? Are you going to be backpacking? Are you going to just be traveling around to different spots in your car and camping out of that? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, and everybody has preferences. So just take that into consideration. If you're wanting to go backpacking, maybe you don't need to pack as much gear, but if you can afford to pack a little heavier, it doesn't hurt to have some of that extra gear on hand with you. So that's just one consideration to think of as well. Also, the time of year. Are you going to be going right now in the summer? That's a great time to be out there. People all across the country are utilizing national parks, state parks, places like that to go camping. One of my favorite times to go camping is late fall, kind of when that first cool breeze starts coming over in that early morning, and you can feel the crunchiness of the leaves all around you. That's kind of my favorite time to be out there, but everybody has different times of year that they like to be out there. And that's going to dictate some of the different gear that you might need, believe it or not. We're going to talk about a few of those things here in just a second. And then also just be considerate of, or be considering, am I going to be doing any other activities while I'm out there? Do I plan to fish? Is this going to be a camping trip, joint hunting trip? Am I going to just be backpacking, sightseeing, birding? Be thinking of some of the other activities that you might want to participate in while you're out there, just so you make sure that you have everything that you need to get you through that trip. All right. Do y'all have any other considerations that you might want to add to that list? If not, we'll jump right into kind of some of the basic stuff. Perfect. All right. So thinking about the 3 things that, if you break it down to the most basic level, what do humans need to survive? You're going to be looking at, you need some type of shelter. You're going to need something to eat, something to drink, and you're going to probably need some clothes and things like that as well. So thinking of those 3 things, the first one being shelter. What am I going to sleep in while I go out there and go backpacking? You can sleep under the stars. You can do whatever you want, but most people like to have something over their head. And a good option that most people like to use are tents. And there's a lot of different types of tents you could get. There's backpacking tents. Those are going to be usually smaller, lightweight. You can fit 1 to 2 people in it, probably at most. They're designed to be really easily packable inside of a pack so that you're not having to lug around this big, heavy tent while you're out enjoying nature, while you're out hiking or whatever it might be. But there's also family sized tents that can fit everybody. Those offer more space. They're usually still fairly simple to set up, just a couple poles a lot of time, but they can make more complicated versions just depending on, what it is that you might go out and buy or what you might invest in. Those are going to be a little bit more comfortable if you're going to be doing a longer stay. You can, in the morning, you can get up and stretch and put your clothes on in those and not have to worry about stepping out into that cold air if you're going later in the year or something like that. So that's a good option. Maybe if, you've got kids or you're just wanting to have a little bit more space. They make some of those bigger family sized tents, but they also make really heavy duty tents that are made out of like waxed canvas and things like that. Those are really good options if you're going to be going out for some extended stays of a week or more. They can handle the weather conditions a lot better than those lightweight tents. Like I said, they're made of that canvas material, so they're just tough. Those can be a little bit more expensive sometimes. I know we've got a couple of those that we like to use for some of our hunting and fishing academy events and things like that. They offer a lot of good space, and especially if you're going to have a lot of people kind of on your trip or something like that, it gives more communal space if nothing else as well. Let's see here. Kate, Megan, do y'all have anything that you like to mention on the tent side of things? I've got a couple other things I might throw out here, but I mean, when y'all go out, do you do a lot of tent camping? If so, what do y'all like to use?
Yeah, I mean, I've used the same tent for a long time, and it's sort of it's a one person, just like a budget lightweight tent. I did not, if you guys have looked into backpacking, there's all kinds of ultralight gear out there you can get, which is outrageously expensive a lot of times. It can be prohibitive, but I haven't found anything wrong with a pretty cheap, bottom of the barrel tent, just to sort of, I wanted to go backpacking, wanted to get a tent, so that's what I got, and it has lasted a good while. It's not the lightest, it packs up pretty small, and that is good enough for me, and it's been fantastic.
Awesome.
And I usually sleep in my hammock. Although right now I'm sort of tent shopping, just because the hammock is colder in the colder weather than a tent's gonna be. But I like the hammock because you just have your hammock and your straps. You don't have to worry about a sleeping pad. I do have a pretty hefty sleeping bag that I sleep in that helps with the cold. But also sometimes, depending on where you're camping, you don't have the option to hang straps. Some places like to keep their trees protected, so they don't allow you to hang hammocks there. So I'm kind of looking at tents just so I always have an option depending on where I'm going.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you said that, Kate, because that really just leads me right into my next point
Nice.
in terms of like some of your lodging options while you're out camping. And hammocks are a great option. I know it seems like in recent years, the more I go out, the more that I see people using those. And I think that's a lot due in part just because there's a lot more good options. There's a lot more options out there now than there used to be. I know Taylor, our manager for Hunting and Fishing Academy, anytime he comes to an in-person event, as long as it's not going to be a torrential downpour of rain, he stays in his hammock, and he usually sleeps just fine, if not better than I do, sleeping on the ground. So he really likes his, and they're great for, like you said, going hiking, or if you're going to be moving around a lot, you can just pack it up and put it in your bag. But you do want to make sure there's enough trees to hang straps and things like that. And that's not always going to be an option, but here in Tennessee, a squirrel could run from east to west and never touch the ground mostly. So there's always going to be plenty of trees around if you're wanting to do that. So that's a great option. And I know there's a lot of different brands out there. Some of the things that we'll send you guys tomorrow in that follow-up email is just some resources where you might be able to go and kind of start looking into some of these different options and things like that. Let's see here. So on the same note of kind of lodging, you want to talk about, bedding, especially if you're going to be going out in the later winter months, fall, even early spring. You're going to want something that keeps you warm. But I mean, even in the summertime, you'd be surprised, even when it's 90 degrees during the day, it's going to get down into the 50s or 60s at night. You'd be surprised how chilled you'd wake up even in the middle of summer. Not always, but if you don't have the right kind of stuff to keep you comfortable, it could make your camping experience not as enjoyable. So one of the biggest things that people fail to do, and Kate, you've already touched on it, is finding a good sleeping pad or some type of insulation to separate them from the ground. Most people don't realize that most of your body heat when you're out camping is going to be just sucked right into the ground. The ground sucks a lot of heat out of you. And it's really going to make you a lot more uncomfortable. One, it's uncomfortable to lay just on the plain ground if you don't have something to kind of support you, but it also takes a lot of that heat out of you as well. So the thicker the sleeping pad, usually the better the insulated you're going to be, but also more comfortable you're going to be. There's a lot of different options out there. Some of them are just foam pads that you can roll up. Kind of looks like a, maybe a little bit thicker version of a yoga mat. There's some that you can inflate. But if you're going to be in a position to go out, you're going to have access to electricity still maybe, or even not, you can still use like an air mattress or something like that if you're not worried about packing something heavier in with you. So be thinking about that too. And a lot of people fail to remember that and end up just sleeping on the cold, hard ground and realize in the morning that probably wasn't the best idea I've had. So planning ahead of time and finding a good sleeping pad that works for you guys is going to go a long way. I know I have one of those really heavy duty Cabela's sleeping pads that they make. It's about this thick. I mean, you could use it as a regular mattress if you wanted to. It's really heavy and it's a lot to pack in, but on really cold nights when I'm camping, and if I'm in a position to pack that in, it is great to have it. I love it. But a lot of people, again, if you've got just one that you can inflate or just a little roll out mat, that goes a long way as well. Do y'all use a specific kind when y'all go out, or do you have a preference on, air mattresses or kind of the foam pads? What do y'all like to use?
Yeah, I mean, for years I used a accordion style foam, and that thing's great because it's never going to get a hole in it. You never have to patch it. It doesn't matter if, what rocks you lay on. You can't really injure the thing, and then you can use it a lot of times to sit places when it's wet. So it's sort of multi-purpose. But over time, if for some reason I'm just not comfortable on it anymore and can't sleep on it, so looking for a new one. But I have not found a good inflatable one that is going to work. But I do have for car camping a really wonderful mattress that is a twin size that trifolds, and it actually fits in the back of my SUV. And so if you guys are ever, if anybody's into car camping but doesn't have a tent, you can get a pretty affordable folding mattress on Amazon that just lays out in the back. If you lay your seats down, you can sleep in there, and it's almost more comfortable than sleeping at my house. So definitely lots of options. You just got to be sort of creative about it that way.
Yeah, and I sleep in the hammock, so I don't use a sleeping pad. And I do have one, but it's really old and has a hole in it, I think. But one thing that Megan was struggling with this spring on a trip we were on together was a very noisy sleeping pad.
Yes.
So your campmates will appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you have a quiet sleeping pad, if you can test it out in a store before you buy it, or REI has a really good return policy. If you get it and you find out that it is a noisy one, you can send it back. But
it was an inflatable, lightweight sleeping mat that was so noisy it actually kept me awake. It woke me up all night as I moved around. So yes, testing them out and having a good return policy is definitely key to a lot of this camping stuff, because as Jeb mentioned before, you just got to try things out and see what works the best for you, because it is absolutely different for everybody.
Yeah. And just a pro tip too, speaking from experience and watching others make this same mistake, if you are going to be using some type of inflatable pad or a sleeping, air mattress, something like that, be sure that the valve on the end of it is closed, because if you don't, you'll start out sleeping great, but you'll wake up on the ground and there will be no air left in your mattress. So make sure you take care of that before you crawl in for the night.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll keep moving here. So we've kind of talked about some tents, ideas, hammocks. We've talked a little bit about car camping and kind of what you are going to have around you as far as walls and maybe a roof over your head. We've talked about sleeping mats, what you want underneath you. So let's talk about kind of that next step in the process and thinking about sleeping arrangements. And a lot of times that's going to be sleeping bags. There's a lot of different options out there. And again, not every one of them is going to work for the type of camping that you are going to want to do. People prefer to camp in warmer months. Some people prefer to camp in cooler months. But it's important to know that no matter when you're going out, every sleeping bag, it's different, and they're rated for different temps a lot of times. If you're new to camping, kind of new to buying some of these gear items, you might notice that when you go to the store, the tag or the description or something like that, it'll say this is a 30-degree sleeping bag. And that kind of just gives you a rough idea of the temperature that you would be, I'm hesitant to say comfortable in, because a lot of times those are kind of like a baseline suggestion. So there's 30-degree, 20-degree, even 0-degree and sub-degree bags. And a lot of times that's not necessarily to say this is what you'll be comfortable in. So if it's going to be 30 degrees outside tonight, or if it's going to be 50 degrees out tonight, I've got a 50-degree bag, this means I'll be perfectly comfortable. A lot of times those are more of suggestions and what will keep you alive, and not just what will keep you comfortable.
Yes.
Speaking from experience. So Make sure that you match the sleeping bag to the weather. Do your homework ahead of time. Know what that's going to look like. And again, just because it says it's a 30-degree bag or a 20-degree bag, whatever, doesn't mean that you're not going to get cold. And a lot of that goes back to having proper insulation underneath you as well. But there's, like I said, there's a ton of different options out there. They make sleeping bags that fold up into little packs about this big that you can use for backpacking. Or if you're like me, you've got one that probably weighs as much as I do. So it just match it to the type of experience that you're going for. If you're wanting to be out there for multiple days in a row, it's probably a good idea to have a little bit of a thicker sleeping bag if you can afford to pack it in with you. But if you're just going for a night or two, one of those small packable ones, those are going to work great for you as well. And if you are curious or just have questions about those types of things, going to places that specialize in selling this equipment is going to be a lot better experience for you than just going to Walmart and picking something up off the shelf. Nothing against Walmart. I mean, you can find anything you need there, but if you have really specific questions or you're doing a really specific type of camping, I've just found that it's better to go to places that are really experienced in those things and know what they're talking about. Places like REI, and just, even sometimes you can get away with going to like Bass Pro and stuff like that. But if you go to a specific store that sells a lot of camping things and has a lot of different options, I think you'll be better suited and a little bit better pleased in your purchasing experience of buying something going forward.
A note on that temperature rating for those sleeping bags. This is something I heard really recently, is that women's sleeping bags are rated differently because our body temperature tends to be lower. And so you need more insulation in the sleeping bag for it to be rated for a certain temperature. And so those, male sleeping bags versus female sleeping bags really do actually make a difference. So if you're a woman that's looking for a sleeping bag, it's definitely important to pay attention to that temperature rating even a little more.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that they made sleeping bags like that. So look at me learning something new. That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I think I heard that the rule of thumb is to add about 10 degrees if you're a woman. But product specs are usually a really good place to look for that detailed information.
Yeah, for sure. And like Megan was talking about earlier, if you're looking to buy something, going to those places that have good return policies are really good sometimes because, odds are you might go through a couple of them before you find one that you really like, especially if you're going to be doing it over and over again. And the biggest thing that I've learned in talking with people that say, I hate camping, I don't want to sleep on the ground, why would anybody ever do that? We have evolved way past sleeping outside as people. Trust me, I've heard people say that. The biggest reason is that they don't have the right gear to keep them comfortable to make it an enjoyable experience. It can be miserable if you don't have the right stuff. And it might be a little bit of trial and error, but just because you go one time and you got a little bit uncomfortable, I don't want that to, inhibit you guys from going again. There's a lot of gear out there that you probably just don't know about that's designed to make those experiences better. And I know for some people, camping might just be a small part of the other activities they're going to do. Maybe you're going on a hunting trip and you don't have any other option but to go camp, or maybe you're going hiking and you're going to be out there for a day or two. You don't have any other option but to camp. So making sure that you just have the right gear that's going to suit the stuff that you want to do is going to go a long way in making your experience a whole lot more enjoyable. So on that same note, one of the last few things that we'll talk about in terms of bedding specifically is just having, maybe not, wrong slide. It's just having a pillow, some type of camp pillow. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out to our in-person events at hunting and fishing academy hunts and things, and realizing at the end of the day, I didn't bring my camping pillow with me. So I'm rolling up hoodies and trying to make some type of mat to lay my head on, and it just doesn't usually go well. So having something that you can put your head on after a long day of hiking or hunting, that's going to go a long way in making your experience better. And again, it doesn't have to be a ginormous, memory foam pillow like I have here at my house. It can be something small, just something that's going to keep your head up off of the ground. It's going to help your sleeping experience be a whole lot better.
One thing I'll
And-
do is stuff sweatshirts and my extra clothing into my sleeping bag stuff sack and kind of roll that up, and that kind of keeps everything together. And that makes a good makeshift pillow on the trail.
Yeah, for sure. I hadn't even thought of that, Kate. I'm probably going to start implementing that strategy, because I always start with a nice rolled up hoodie, but by the time I wake up, it's unraveled.
All over the place.
Yeah, that's a good idea, especially if you are going somewhere, that you don't want to pack a square pillow in with you. You can kind of throw one together. So yeah, that's a great idea for sure. One other thing I wanted to mention, and Kate, Megan, y'all feel free to jump in on this too, is that having proper clothing when you go out and camping is also a big thing, especially when it comes to sleeping. A lot of times people think that, especially if it's going to be cold, that they need to wear a lot of clothes in their sleeping bag. And that's not always the case. They make some stuff that's designed, to help keep body heat in and stuff like that. But the thing that I'm talking about mostly is that, when you're out there, you're outside, you're out in the elements, it helps to have really good clothing. Lots of changes of socks for when your feet get wet, having good base layers, things like that you might not think about in terms of going out and camping. We see that a lot at our in-person events as well. But again, just little things like that just go a long way in making your experience more comfortable, more enjoyable, and you can spend more time doing what you want to do, whether it be fishing, biking, birding, whatever. You have more time to focus on those things and enjoy it, as opposed to being like, man, my feet are really cold. I'm not comfortable right now. And that puts a lot of people away. But again, it just goes back to not being prepared. And that's kind of what we want to do, is just give you guys a good kind of foundational step and things to think about to go out and do those things. So Kate, Megan, I think y'all kind of already touched on this a little bit. But before we talk about the next thing, which is going to be cooking gear, in terms of these things that we've talked about so far, what's your favorite type of camping? How does that impact the planning that you implement when thinking about the gear that you're going to need? What does that process look like for you guys from the time that you're going to say, I want to go camping, to deciding, like where you want to go and what you're going to take with you? What does that look like for you guys?
I think where I go is probably going to be the starting point, because that's going to dictate weather and what kind of layers I need to bring. But my favorite kind of camping is backpacking. I think I just really enjoy the forced minimalism, because when I car camp, I'm just like, oh, you want to take that? Yes, let's just throw that in the car. We might need it, we might not. And then the next thing I know, I can't see out of the back of my car because I have too much stuff in there. Whereas with the backpacking, it's what can I fit in my pack and what am I willing to carry? What weight-wise am I willing to carry? So it just really forces me down to the essentials. And I just don't have all this extra stuff with me.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like Kate said, it's the sort of picking out the destination first, where you want to go, what's interesting to you. But how I sort of determine what I'm going to pack, I've got a couple of medium-sized bins that I keep all of my camping gear in, and frequently we'll just put those in the car. Don't really like pack a ton beforehand, because I find that I'm real busy while I'm at home. There's a lot to think about. I'm trying to, make sure everything's taken care of before I leave to go to the woods, that I'll be more likely to forget something, before I even get in the car. And so I'll just pack my camping bins that's got all my stuff in it. And then as I'm driving, I'll use that time to sort of be like, okay, what do I want to carry? What do I want to take? And then I'm, don't accidentally leave my rain gear at home, or accidentally leave my cook stove at home. I've got everything there. I know it. And it makes it really easy to go on a camping trip, because don't feel like I'm having to gather everything from around my house. I just throw it in the car and pack it up when I get there. Or if you change your mind on the way and want to go car camping, just book a quick spot. You're ready for that too. So.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about that next kind of main thing that you're going to want to think about while you're out camping is food. A lot of times people that if you at least give them enough food and they have something hot to eat at the end of the day, that goes further than any sleeping bag ever could. And I see we're getting a little bit short on time, so we'll kind of talk about these things a little bit quicker, and then we'll kind of see what questions you guys have. So one of the biggest things that you're going to be needing to think about in terms of cooking while you're out camping is what's your heat source going to be? What are you going to cook over? Are you going to cook over the open flame of the fire like these folks are doing? Or are you going to be using something else? Something that a lot of people like to utilize are propane, butane burners, things like that. They can be big, small. And those are good options sometimes, even for backpackers when they make those little single burners. Those aren't my favorite option, just because it can cost a lot to get new tanks. And it's not always the most efficient way to heat your food while you're out in the woods. Sometimes those don't work as well if you have rain or really cold weather, but they work really well for like shorter trips, things like that. A lot of people like to use them. They work really well if you're using stainless steel pots and pans, stuff like that. That's lightweight. That's a good option to consider. Just be sure that, again, whatever you pack in with you, you be sure to bring that back out with you as well. The second one being, cooking over a campfire, or even if you're going to be in a place where you can bring it, just bring some charcoal and have a little grill or something like that. Campfire griddles are a great way to easily save space. They can hold all of your food. I think I have a picture of one here. Well, these are the propane and the butane burners that I was talking about. I've got a couple of these that we use every now and then. Like I said, they're not my favorite. Sometimes they can be a little bit temperamental, but if you're going to be out there and you can afford to pack it, it's a good option, but it's not your only option per se. And again, talking about those campfire griddles, those are a great way if you don't want to pack in your own heat source and you just want to utilize, the campfire, things like that. You can throw that over it. You can use just about any kind of pot or pan. If you're not afraid to pack some stuff in with you, those are a great thing to have with you as well. And they work good. I mean, you could use it over any flame. You can make coffee on them, anything, just about. Let's talk about some of the utensils you could use as well. There's a few different options, and everybody's going to do this differently. Like I said, one of them is stainless steel. It's really lightweight, easy to pack, easy to clean. There's lots of options out there for stainless steel camping stuff, pots, pans, cups, anything that you could think of that you might need to cook with. They make it. But again, everybody has a different way of doing things, different preferences. I just listed a couple out here for you guys, kind of get you thinking about it. And a lot of places at those camping stores and equipment providers, they're going to have a lot of different options for you guys to look at in terms of those things. So just be mindful of that. My favorite way to cook while I'm camping, and you have to be a little bit prepared to pack it in and out, but it's cast iron. Dutch ovens, things like that, they can be used to cook almost anything from biscuits to bacon, eggs, soup. You can do it in a Dutch oven. They're heavy, but they're a great option, especially if you're going to be out there for a longer stage. You're going to be cooking a lot, or you need to make a lot in one serving. They're a great tool to have out there while you camp. I love cast iron. There's a lot of folks around our office that love using cast iron. We use it at just about every hunting and fishing academy event. And the famous manufacturer Lodge cast iron, I mean, they make it right here in Tennessee. So it's always great to have stuff like that to pack in with you as well. And you can just use coals. I mean, you can use open flame on that if you want to, but you can just use the coals from your fire or bag charcoal, whatever. That's a great option. And I love using those. And again, that kind of just goes back to, seems like there's a really cool nostalgia around using cast iron and stuff. Megan, Kate, what's y'all's favorite kind of heat source, cooking utensils? What do y'all like to take out there with you? And I guess it depends on the type of camping, but what do y'all like to use?
Yeah, well, if I'm backpacking, of course, it's just like the one little propane stove and one pot. But I have to say, car camping, it's cast iron all the way. There's just nothing that compares with it. And it's so versatile. If you just got two sizes of two pans, then you're good to go to cook anything that you would want for however long you want to stay.
Let's see here. There is a few little miscellaneous things that you might not think about that you'll need. If you are camping from your car and you're not worried about, packing in a tote or something like that, it's always good to have a few things, just like reusable utensils, extra seasonings, cleaning supplies, things like that, that you can just kind of throw in a little tote and have with you there, that you might, have a little mobile kitchen. That's one of the things that we have with us at all of our events, is just having like we call it a chuck box, basically, because if it's random and you don't know what to do with it, just chuck it in that box and you've got it all right there ready to go. So those are great kind of just things to be thinking about, extra just little cooking utensils, seasonings, anything you might want to use that you're not really sure what to do with, just pack it in a little tote. You can just have that for all your camping adventures. All right.
Guys, we do have one question here. Ollie
Yeah.
asked, do you have any rain gear recommendations?
There's a lot of different brands out there for stuff that you can find. I know one, in terms of clothing, one really popular brand is Frog Tog. They make, the Frog Tog pants and shirts, pullover stuff. I'm assuming you're talking about clothing specific things. But again, there's a lot of different options for stuff out there. Kate, Megan, do y'all know of anything else that you guys like to use?
The Frog Togs for sure. I've got a pair of rain pants that are for biking, for like commuter biking, that have been really great. But other than that, sort of giant poncho has really done the trick, to sort of cover you and cover your pack if you are backpacking, or even if you're just hiking for the day. A big poncho to cover you until you can either get back to your car or get your camp set up. But that's for me, it has worked really well.
Yeah, I have one of those 3-in-1 jackets that is really versatile. So I really like that, just because I can kind of pack the one item that keeps me warm and keeps me dry all in one.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope that answers your questions. And like I said, it really just depends. I mean, what all you're wanting to do, because sometimes that rain gear, a lot of it can be thinner, different materials, things like that. So just making sure that you get something that's going to be durable enough for you, that's going to last a while too. I had to break down and invest in a new rain jacket for our in-person stuff, and I think mine is a Frog Tog. That's just a brand that I'm familiar with, but different people have different preferences as well. So hope that answers your question. Chris, are there any more other questions while we're kind of here at a good stopping point?
Yeah, we do have another question. They asked anything for animal protection, like bug protection, and then protection for women camping alone. What do you guys carry?
It's a great question. I actually was camping this past weekend in the Smokies, and a bear came into our campsite. So this is pretty fresh on my mind right now. But I always have a bear bell on my pack. So just as I'm walking, that bell is just ringing. Even if I'm not in bear country, I like to keep that on there, because there are more than just bears out in the woods. And I think it's good for us to announce ourselves like, hey, a human is coming into your space. Here I am passing through. And you also want to make sure that if you are, especially if you're backpacking, but even if you're car camping too, you want to make sure that you're putting your food up at night. So if you're car camping, you can just put those things in your car. But if you're backpacking and in the backcountry, anything that is smelly, from your food, your trash, your toothpaste, even your hand sanitizer, even if that hand sanitizer is unscented, you want to make sure you're putting all those things in a bag and hanging them from a tree far away from where you're camping. So that'll just keep things, obviously we want to look out for bears, but raccoons and possums, they can still get into your food, and you don't want that to happen. So take some rope with you. Some parachute cord is usually good enough. Find a good spot to hang it from a tree, and make sure it's really far off the ground and also far away from the trunk of the tree. And you can also get bear spray. Definitely more of a last resort item to have, but if that makes you feel more comfortable, if you're out in the woods, especially if you're hiking alone, that can be a good item to have on hand.
Yeah, and it's important to remember too, more often than not, like Kate said, if you're being smart, you don't have to be, overly loud or anything like that. But if you're in a position where, you're going on a hike or you're camping and you're announcing your presence in a way that's not disruptive, but it lets the other wildlife in the area know, like, hey, I'm coming through. More often than not, you're probably never going to encounter wildlife if you're doing that in a right way. It's important to know most of the time they're not going to come seek you out and figure out what it is you're doing and things like that. They're just going to kind of mind their own business. A lot of times when you see people get into scenarios where they do have really close encounters, it's because they're doing things like Kate said, where they're not storing their food properly, and so that's just something that entices critters to come snooping around, or it's the fault of the people out there getting too close intentionally, trying to get a picture or something like that. They're trying to get up close and personable with the wildlife, and a lot of times that puts you and the wildlife in a dangerous position. But more often than not, just remember that if you're doing things in a respectful way, you're doing things in a smart way, most of the time bears even will leave you alone. They'll go on to do their own thing. They'll let you do your thing.
That's the truth. Yeah, and I think that when somebody says, or women camping alone, protection that way, I've done some camping by myself, and in those instances, I'll usually, do all the sort of common safety things. Like I will leave all my information with somebody here at home, and even the way I'm going to drive, which way I'm going to drive to the campsite, how I'm coming out. When I get there, I try to make sure I get there before the ranger station has closed, so that I'm checking in with a real person, so that I, just sort of making contact with people along the way. But, as far as feeling sort of safe while camping, it can be nerve-wracking, or I guess at night by yourself in the woods. And I think that's true for anybody. But I guess I feel like the drive over there, like the drive going down 24 or 40 to get to my campsite, is almost more the risk, or more the dangerous part than being in the woods alone. I think it's really sort of that that fear where your mind can get to you almost is what creates the fear than there being actual danger a lot of times. But I think there's definitely a lot of common sense sort of precautions that you take to just make sure that somebody knows where you're going and when you're supposed to be back, and that will definitely make sure to check in on you. And you can even ask somebody at their ranger station to do something similar, or like tell them you will be back to check in. If you're not, there's a problem. So making contact with humans always helps you to feel a little bit safer.
For sure. That's one of the big things. Even not just in the camping world, but anytime you're going to go out by yourself doing something, it's always a good idea to make sure that other people know where you are and when to expect you back and things like that. So that's a great point. Any other questions, Chris?
Yeah, we do have one more, and they asked anything for first aid that is essential.
Yeah. The easiest thing that you could do, instead of trying to piece together a bunch of individual things, the easiest thing that you could do is go to your local, academy, your Bass Pro or REI, whatever you've got that sells camping equipment, and just buy a first aid kit, because it's going to have all of the essential things in it that you need. They even make some that are more extensive as far as like trauma care to help things like gunshot wounds. There's like tourniquets in there. So they make some more kind of heavy duty first aid kits, but you can go buy a camping first aid kit that'll have all kinds of things in it, just Band-Aids, gauze, things like that in it as well. Y'all have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll second that. Buying a first aid kit is just really the way to get a full range of things that you could ever need. But the one thing that I found lacking from them is just packets of electrolytes, like Emergency or something like that. Sometimes it can just get hotter than you expected. You hike harder than you thought you were going to, and having those electrolytes there to pour into your water and drink those and sort of bring you back from getting dehydrated is really important, because of course dehydration, you can run out of food and go for a little while, but you never want to get dehydrated.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I'm gonna start implementing that, Megan. That's a good one.
Yeah, it comes from making a poor choice before I went on a trip. So please learn from my lesson.
Kate, do you have anything you want to add to that question?
Not too much. I always like to have some alcohol swabs with me, just because you never know when you're gonna get a cut. And I'm always getting blisters on my feet, so I've always got a good pack of Band-Aids with me too.
Yeah, moleskins too.
Oh yes, moleskin.
Mm-hmm.
That's a game changer for the blisters.
Awesome. Chris, do we have any more questions before we cover these last few things? And I know we've kind of gone a few minutes over, so we'll wrap up pretty quick. And then if you guys do have any more questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes here at the end, and then be sure to answer those. And like I said, we're gonna send you guys some more info tomorrow. But if you got any more questions, even beyond tonight, if you think of something, send them our way. Shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to answer them. One of the last few things that I wanted to cover real briefly was just some miscellaneous gear that you might not think about. I know we've talked a lot about tents and sleeping bags and things like that, but it's always good to have a few kind of miscellaneous things with you as well. The big thing that I would probably never go into the woods without would be a knife of some sort, whether it be a pocket knife or just something that you can use to cut rope or whatever it is you might need. And having rope and paracord, those are great things. We already had a question about a first aid kit. That's a great item to take with you, especially if you're going to be car camping. That's just something you can just leave in your car all the time. You always have it there with you. Other useful gear, water filtration systems. They make the little life straw things. They make iodine tablets, all different kind of options that you can use to filter water out there to make it safe to drink. Headlamps, a packable battery phone charger. I know that was something, Megan, you sent me in your list, something you like to have with you. In this day and age, everybody's got their phone on them. And if you're going to go camping, it's nice to have a way to charge it. It's a safety thing too. If you're ever in trouble and you're out there, having a way to charge your phone, if you've got a good enough signal to get a text or a phone call through, that could be a game changer for you. Mm-hmm. Having a small axe or a little hatchet, to cut firewood. Having something to start that fire with, that's always a good thing to have as well. What kind of miscellaneous gear items do y'all like to pack in with you when y'all go camping?
I had this idea from Megan. I like to have recently bought this little chair that packs down really small. It's about 2 pounds. And it's so much better than sitting on a rock or a log after you've been hiking all day. So that's kind of my extra item that I've started taking with me.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah.
Those little, if you're backpacking or even if you're car camping, those little things that, probably unique to you, everybody finds their own, whatever it is that makes you really comfortable. I love the camp chair as well. I also love having flip-flops at the end of the day so I can take my hiking boots off. Mm-hmm. And then also at the end of the day, I'm not a tea drinker, but for some reason when I'm camping, I love having tea by the fire at night. So that's just a little extra thing that I packed for myself that makes it a little more enjoyable.
Yeah, that's a good point, Megan. I mean, everybody's got those little things that they just like to take in with them. And there's no necessarily exact right way to do all these things, guys. I mean, it's really about just getting out there and experiencing it and figuring out what works for you, and kind of building your gear list from there. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget things, and that just makes you better for the next time you go out. So just be mindful of that. Don't get discouraged and upset, if you go out one time and it just doesn't go well. So just keep at it. And like I said, the more you do it, the better at it you're going to be, the more fun you're going to have because of that as well. So the last thing I want to cover is just some of our favorite places to camp, where to go camping. Here in Tennessee, we are so blessed to have national parks, state parks. We have wildlife management areas you can camp on. We have all sorts of other undeveloped public land that you guys can utilize. One of the things that I just want to close with is kind of talk to us, a couple of people around the office, Kate, Megan, other folks as well, to kind of get a list of places that they like to camp. So the next slide is going to be the Tennessee Wildlife Federation staff favorites. And the first one being the Great Smoky Mountains. If you're living in Tennessee and you want to go camping, you need to make it to the Smokies at some point in your camping adventures and your camping experience. I mean, there's just something about that place. I mean, there's a lot of different options to go as far as specific campgrounds and specific trails to hike. But there's just something about being in the Smokies that just has this cool like feel to it. Like, man, I am really out here doing this. It's just such a cool thing to do. And it's one of the most unique places in North America, in the world. There's so much diversity, so much wildlife, plant life that you guys can experience while you're out there. That by far is number one on our list. Kate, Megan, y'all have anything specific to add about the Smokies in general? I know both of y'all have been there and both of y'all probably frequent there more so than most.
Yeah, I grew up going to the Smokies as like family vacations, and we would just do like small hikes and day hikes. And it wasn't until this past fall that I went backcountry camping in the Smokies for the first time. And it was a completely different experience. I really felt like I was experiencing the Smokies for the first time. The forest is so dense out there. It's just, a lot of it is untouched, hasn't ever been chopped down in any way. So it's, yeah, like Jeb said, there's something about it. It's wild out there. I love it.
And if you guys haven't seen the fireflies that come through on Elkmont Campground in June, it is a really amazing thing to see. I think those synchronized fireflies only exist a couple of places in the world, one of them being at this sort of one little area around a campground in the Smoky Mountains. So you've got to book it early. It's already passed for this year, but if you haven't seen it, it's worth the trip. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, number two on our list that came up when I was talking to staff folks around the office was the Big South Fork. And this is, a really great option, especially if you're in Middle Tennessee or even West Tennessee and you don't have the time to dedicate to driving all the way to the Smokies. You can get a lot of the same kind of feels from going to Big South Fork. There's a lot of similar terrain, similar habitat, things like that. And there's a lot of different options to go out and camp on the Big South Fork. And these areas, again, they're so vast, they're so big, there's so many different places you can go and trails to explore. And a lot of times, if you do your homework and you go at the right time of year, you can go and really not be disturbed by anybody else. You can go and find that, hey, I'm one of very few people that are out here. You kind of have the whole place to yourself if you go at the right time. So that's another really great option. One that if you're a little bit further west in the state is Natchez Trace State Park. That's a great place for folks to get out and go camping, go hiking, things like that. That's a good West Tennessee favorite for folks that are on that side of the state as well. And then the last one being Fall Creek Falls State Park. That's another really popular one. I drove right through there today, done a lot of events in that area. It's a really beautiful, really pretty part of the state. The waterfalls are, unbelievable. It's hard to think that here in Tennessee, we have everything from waterfalls and mountains to, big, wide open spaces and lakes and rivers and things like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of different options. And, I just encourage you guys to go out and find what you like and explore these different places. There's so many different ways to go. And there's so many more I could list. I mean, we could sit here all night just talking a whole class on different places to go. But these are just kind of a few things to give you an idea of places to go start. But something that a lot of people don't realize, and I kind of got to the end of my presentation, so I'll just stop the screen share. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that, there's a lot of wildlife management areas that are open to the public. Those are generally used for, folks to utilize to go hunting, things like that. But there, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are open to camping, and you just got to make sure that you're making sure you're abiding by all the different regulations. A lot of those WMAs, they have specific regulations unique to them, but a lot of them, will allow people to come in and camp. Some of them even have campgrounds. TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, if you're in East Tennessee, a lot of the land along the Tennessee River and river systems around East Tennessee, a lot of that land that's owned by TVA is what they consider undeveloped lands that they open to the public. That's open for you guys to go hunt, hike, camp, whatever. One of my favorite ways to go camping is to go out on the lake and find some of those islands that are just, they're public lands, islands out in the middle of the lake, and go out there and go camp. It's really easy. You can throw everything you want in your boat, just run it out to an island and go camping for the weekend. You can go fish, and that's a really fun thing that I like to do, just because you're out there kind of by yourself, and it's not really about going and hiking and doing a lot of those things when you go camping that way, but it's kind of just a good hangout spot, and you get to go recharge and be out there, usually uninterrupted by other folks as well. But again, if you're looking for places to go camping, we're going to be sending you guys links to state parks website, national parks website, all these different things. So when you're looking to go on your next camping trip, you'll have a really good idea of like places to go start. Kate, Megan, I mean, we talked about a few of them, but I mean, what are some other y'all's favorite spots to go camping? And then after that, we'll answer a few questions and we'll be done for the night.
I'd have to throw in there the Obed Scenic River. That was a place I had not really heard of until maybe a year or two ago, but it's you can camp there. It's car camping. You can do some backcountry as well, but it is one of the only certified night sky parks in Tennessee, so you can see the Milky Way on a clear night. So you can always book a campsite during the new moon when there's no extra light there. I think you can see the Milky Way on any clear night, but it's pretty impressive. It's about 2 hours east of Nashville.
I really like South Cumberland. It's just a quick 2-hour drive from Nashville. Lots of good hikes out there. If you're into rock climbing, there are lots of options there for climbing. Few good waterfalls out there. You can do some, you can hike in about like 5 to 10 miles, or you can just hike in a couple miles. So, or you can car camp. So they've got lots of options over there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, guys, we've kind of reached the end of our material for the night. I know we went a little bit over. Thanks for hanging with us, those of you that did. We'll stick around for just a few more minutes. Chris, do we have any more questions that we have yet to answer? And then we'll kind of close it down for the night.
Yeah, I think you guys covered a lot about the where to camp, and then we just had a question come across about how you can find that wildlife management area information. And I did type it in the question and answer, but we can mention it live that we will be sending out that WMA interactive map in our follow-up email tomorrow. And just click those icons and you can find a wealth of information on those.
Yeah, and if you have a current Tennessee hunting guide, those have all of the WMA information in them as well. Like Chris said, you can find it online using the interactive map system that TWRA uses for their WMA information. Super easy to navigate. You can go around, look at what part of the state you're in. You'll see all the different WMAs. You can click on them and get specific information for each and see if it's open to camping, things like that as well. But yeah, that's a great resource. We'll be sending you guys tomorrow as well. All right. Well, I think that's just about it, guys. I thank you for joining us. Kate, Megan, thank you guys for being on. I really enjoyed it. I think I learned a lot too. Chris, thanks for helping out on the back end. Guys, we're going to be sending you this recording too. So go back, rewatch it. If there's things you think of later on that you've got questions about, feel free to send them our way. And then, like I said, we'll be sure to keep in touch, and we hope to hear about your guys' camping adventure. So, Kate, Megan, is there anything you want to leave folks with on tonight? And then we'll go ahead and just log off.
Get out there, make mistakes, and go do it again.
Absolutely. I will second that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Send us your questions. Be on the lookout for that follow-up email and the recording. We'll be sure to keep in touch, and we hope to see you guys on the next class.